just past the hour, so I think we'll begin today's session, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to our third Building Inclusivity Roundtable of the year, hosted by ACE. As you can see, we have a fantastic panel with us today. We have got people from across the industry, people with lived experience, expertise, practical advice. So a real rounded panel today to be able to help and share and bring to life the Building Inclusivity Roundtable, which is focusing on overcoming barriers with a real emphasis on ethnic minorities and the challenges that are still being faced within the built environment and further afield. But we're concentrating today on the built environment. We only have an hour for today's topic, and it is a wide and vast topic, so we will do our utmost to set the scene, put some things in context, and really drive forward some of those hints, tips, advice and experience that the panel brings to today. We will make sure we share as much of that as possible. If anyone does have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll do our utmost to answer those. If for any reason we're unable to directly answer the question today, or time isn't on our side, we'll make sure that we respond to every one of those questions in the following few days using our expert panels for advice. So as I say, if we don't get to the question today, please don't worry, we will ensure that you get a direct response. We will, as I say, in the interest of time, kick off pretty quickly now to give us the most valuable information sharing session that we possibly could. So I'd like to introduce the panel. I'll hand straight over to Sharon from Constructing Rainbows if you'd like to introduction, then we'll carry on and pass the baton around. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Sharon Slinger from Constructing Rainbows. I've got over 20-year history within the built environment. So my diversity and inclusion consultancy focuses on built environment organisations. And yeah, looking forward to today's session.
Thank you, Sharon. Tony?
Hi everyone, my name is Tony McCaffrey. My pronouns are he, him or they, them. I'm the founder and consulting director of Diversity Scotland, which is a leading diversity, equity and inclusion consulting business, and I'm delighted to be here today.
Thank you, Tony. Farai, would you mind sharing?
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Farai Mashita. My pronouns are she, her. And today I am wearing a yellow jumper. I am a Black woman. I am an international project lead from CBRE, and my day-to-day role involves me working on integrated services, providing solutions for critical engineering and energy solutions for our financial clients. Thank you.
Super, thank you. Melania?
Hi, my name is Melania Santoro. My pronouns is she, her. I'm based in London, and I'm the strategy director for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging at Arcadis. I'm specialized in sustainable business strategies encompassing D&I, organizational behavior, and cultural change, ultimately the S in the environmental, social, and governance targets. And I am so excited to have this conversation today and together really push forward an impact-led agenda in our organizations. Thank you.
Thank you. Kalisha, welcome.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Kalisha Sajpar. I'm a practicing engineer for Ramboll, a civil engineering consultancy, and I also lead the Racial Diversity Network as an employee resource group there. And yeah, really looking forward to this discussion, engaging as many people as we can in this topic.
Brilliant. And Ian, I've saved you to last after introduction. Would you like to kick us off today with the statistics that are, well, for me, quite worrying, but the statistics that you found in your research recently? Oh, I think we've got you on mute. Let me see. Can you? There we go.
Thank you, Claire. My name is Ian Heptonstall. I'm a director for an organisation called Supply Chain Sustainability School, and we run a programme of work called the Fairness, Inclusion and Respect Programme for the construction sector. And through that programme, we're trying to encourage more equality and diversity in the construction sector. It's basically a learning and development programme, and we're reaching out to managers, business owners, etc. And every year, I think we probably reach 2,000 to 3,000 people in the industry with training, but lots to do. Now, one of the things we do, I chair the industry leadership group for this. One of the things we wanted to do was to understand what is the nature of the problem, what is the size of the problem. We need data. We need data to understand that. So what I'm going to share over the next 5 minutes is a very quick summary of 2 different surveys that we've actually done. One survey which looks at diversity benchmarking data within the infrastructure industry, and then another survey which looks at the people who've gone through the third program and what their experiences are to equality issues on site. So just some really interesting stats which have come out from that, which I'd like to share. So I'll go and share my screen now. Okay, so I'll share my screen, and okay. And there we go, hopefully, and I'll go to, hopefully that's coming through okay, yeah? Okay, just a little bit of background. The Construction Leadership Council set out a policy, as you can see on the screen, to devise a common diversity measuring and monitoring system for the industry. So we actually know where we are as an industry. And they said we'd like to do that by December 2022. Really pleased to say that we've got a system in place, and we're really happy to share that, and it's openly available for people to share and benchmark their diversity data, which I think is really important. So we've been doing this work with a number of transport clients within the infrastructure sector, first of all, where we've got 4 major clients come together, and they now for a number of years have been tracking the diversity of their clients, of the contractors, of the tier 1 contractors and consultants, and also their tier 1 suppliers to those main contractors. So we're looking down the value chain and trying to understand what the difference is in diversity with different types of organizations as well. Just to give you an idea of the size, this was completed this year by 88 companies, and 251,000 people were included within that benchmarking process. So bear in mind, in terms of size, somebody tells me the other day that the construction industry as a whole employs about 2 million people. So we're probably only getting to about 10% of the audience here. But I think it's pretty representative of what I come across anecdotally in other areas as well. Interestingly, we've just closed the door on this year's 2022 survey, and the amount of reporting companies has gone up to almost 300, and over 350,000 employees are included in that. So a lot more companies are now reporting, which is really good to see. So some very high figures, you can, in terms of high level figures, you can see here in 2020 and 2021, the breakdown between gender. We're seeing, for example, about 23% of people working in tier 1 organizations are female, but when you get down to tier 2, it's falling down to 16%. The closer you get to site, less equality that we're actually seeing. In terms of ethnic minorities, the pie chart in front of you shows that in total, 13.3% of our data set were from ethnic minorities. Within that, interestingly, the largest number of people from an African background, just under 20% of that 13%, 18% were Indian, and 13% were Caribbean, and then a whole range of smaller sample sizes are included on the left-hand side. But it's 13.3% is what we're seeing in terms of the ethnic minority data set. How that's broken down, this slide shows you a little bit better how that's actually broken down in terms of Asian or Asian British, and then Black or Black British. So out of the total 13.3%, about half of them are from an Asian or British, Asian British background. This data also shows you around religion, interestingly, in terms of how people declared their religion. Interesting that the vast majority of people declared unknown religion or no religion. Yeah, just didn't want to actually report that, which I think is quite interesting. They're not reporting at all. We also collected data around sexual orientation, which you see on the screen in front of you. Also collected data on disability. And one thing we're seeing on disability is that we're seeing a lot more reporting around disability, which is really great. So we've been collecting data for about 5 or 6 years, being a lot more reporting. We're also seeing data on the age breakdown of people within industry as well. And you'll notice here that we assigned, when you get to the age group 35, women are leaving the industry a lot in the graph on the right-hand side, a lot quicker than men are leaving the industry. And that's interesting and worrying. So we're attracting women into the industry, but they're leaving. And actually, when we look at why people are leaving, or what age group women are leaving. You can see it again on here. By voluntary leavers, it is voluntary leavers. So women are voluntarily leaving the industry at the age of 35, and we need to do clearly more to retain that talent in the organisation. We also asked companies what type of diversity policy they had in place. Now, it's not the numbers on here which are particularly of interest. Tier 1, obviously lots of data in terms of the people got right policies and procedures. Tier 2, getting less. But what we were really interested in is this next slide. This next slide is a very busy slide. Apologies for that. But what this slide shows us, if you go down to the green bar, which is going across that, in terms of people who are applying for jobs in the construction sector. So we had, in our data set, we had 192,000 white applicants and we had 143,000 ethnic minority applicants. First of all, that tells me that we're not having a problem reaching ethnic minorities in terms of applicants, which is often said as an issue. But what we are seeing there through the recruitment process, why does it take, why does it take 15 ethnic minorities to become shortlisted for interview when it's only taking 4 white people to get interviewed? So there's a big issue there in terms of the recruitment process and what is going on in the recruitment process in terms of shortlisting and then interviewing people from an ethnic minority background. What our clients and the third program have done about that is we put a lot of training in place to try to help managers overcome some of their unconscious biases that they're having, and put some guidance documents together in terms of how to go through the selection process, so we don't end up with this problem that we're seeing here. We also did a survey of people who've been through the third program, and why I want to share this is we got over 1,000 responses to this, so it's a large sample size. But specifically, when we were asking people about their experience on site, and particularly their experience of people being treated unfairly or less favourably, it's very interesting there that whereas 54% of respondents from an Asian background, only 24% of people from a black background agreed. So that's meaning that 76% of people from a black background are seeing people being treated unfairly, which it's just it's showing us there's something about the lived experience for people from a black background compared to people from an Asian background, and indeed from a white background as well. And if anything, it shows us that need to break out that term BAME and really look at the data and understand between different ethnic minority groups, what is that lived experience? I think that's really important for us to understand. So as a program where we're putting together a special group to look at this and see what we can put in place to try to address those issues. So that's really me finished in terms of giving you some of the data. I know it was a very quick rush through, but there's some not good data, I think, in terms of the lived experience from people from a black background working in the construction industry. There's not good data of people from ethnic minorities getting selected for interview as well. So yeah, so I think there's a couple of really worrying things there. And then as contrary to that, we are still seeing a lot of people from an ethnic minority background applying for jobs. So there's a slight positive we can take from there. It's just that we're losing them through the application process. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and hopefully that helps as a start off for our discussions.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Ian. Tony, I think you have your hand up. Did you want to interject?
Yeah, I wanted to say it's really great to see data being gathered and collated and presented in that way. It's absolutely fantastic, and I was particularly interested with the slide that you said it was busy in terms of how it breaks down at each end of each part of the process. I guess something that I would love to see, and I don't know if you've gathered this data, and it may be something that could be pulled together in future years, is actually looking at what's behind that, though, and how people are going into the industry. If we take people from the global ethnic majority, and I won't use the term ethnic minorities, by the way, because I find it a bit problematic, but I appreciate other people are using different language. I'm probably more interested in understanding what positions people hold in organizations, understanding, how much influence they have, what size of team they have, what size of budget they have, what's their P&L responsibility, what's their leadership responsibility. Because in many cases, when we're seeing statistics that show pure representation in an organization, we're not actually seeing where the power and influence lies. And I think that we really need to be very clearly trying to understand, okay, organization A is taking you know, X number of people from the global ethnic majority into their organization, or this industry is taking this many people, but where are they going in the organization? Are they acting in senior roles? Are they acting as role models, etc.? So it'd be really great to start digging into that data so that we can year on year compare you know, the progression opportunities for individuals from the global ethnic majority.
Tony, we don't actually have that level of granularity to our data, but I totally agree with you. And it's interesting when we look at some of the companies who are employers within that group. For example, Transport for London does very well in its kind of diversity breakdown. But when you actually look at some of the roles which are involved in that, we can understand why. Yeah. I don't know if anybody's come across the McKinsey report about women in boardrooms in America, and some very, very interesting breakdowns about the progression of women from different ethnic minority groups, and where the ceiling actually exists from people in an Asian background, or from people from a Black background, or a Mexican background. Very interesting. Yeah.
And I think building on your points, there's a couple of comments coming from the audience around breaking data down even further and understanding, you know, the different backgrounds within the data that we're reporting. So I think maybe there is something there that potentially as a group we might be able to take away and even have a bigger look at how data is collected and you know, the terminology is grouped. And I think, Tony, you mentioned it, what language we use, and is there an opportunity to explore language even further? And I think some of the data may help support that as well. So Ian, great to share that data. Whilst it's not great data to be looking at in terms of the picture it's telling us, I think it's really it's really important that, like Tony was saying, we've got that as a starting point for this conversation and other future actions coming off the back of it. So I know, Ian, you're not with us for the whole presentation today. So whilst I've got you live on screen, I wondered if there is, based on your experience or data, anything at this stage you want to share as a piece of advice or a snapshot of hints that you want to share with the panel today?
Well, to be honest, one of the things we found in terms of making progress here is that we need to get allies within the business. You know, if it just becomes an HR and EDI director's role in an organization, we end up just speaking to, you know, it's an echo chamber. So we need to reach out and get commercial leads, procurement leads, whatever they are within your business, and really get those allies to understand and promote down through the organization. The FIR program's been very good, and one bit of success we've had with the FIR program is that we wanted to get down beneath the tier 1 major contractors in the construction industry. And whilst we were talking to HR directors in those organizations, we weren't really getting anywhere. We knew the subjects, we knew what to do, but we weren't reaching to the supply chain. So one thing we actually did was reach out to procurement directors in the likes of Skanska, Osborne, Balfour Beatty and the like, and getting their buy-in to this and getting their ability to then put it in commercial terms to their key suppliers that this was a really important issue, and get them around the table and get them to advocate of why, you know, having a diverse workforce is really important to your business and what the business benefits are. It's really, we've got to talk in business benefits if we're going to bring on a new audience of people who will actually want to affect change. Yeah,
brilliant. Thank you, Ian. I wanted to make sure that we got your takeaway in there before you need to shoot off. So I appreciate that. Thank you. I mean, I don't know if the panelists, I know Farai, Kalisha, you had some points on, you know, why is this the situation? And, you know, I think you wanted to share some of your views and thoughts on that. May I hand over to you both?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for the opportunity. So as mentioned in my introduction, my background is engineering, mechanical engineering to be precise. And I fall under construction. And shockingly, based on the stats that we saw, it's quite upsetting because as of today, only 16.5% of the workforce in engineering construction is only women in the UK. And if you look at how big that is, it's actually quite a small number. And for me, my experience is we're looking at it from a career point of view, but if you actually take a step back, this is actually a grassroots problem. And by that, I mean the pink aisle versus the quote unquote manly boys toy aisle. The pink aisle is pink, it's Barbie, holding a handbag, all about makeup. You go to the manly boys toy section, you've got tractors, you've got hammers, you've got building material, you've got Play-Doh, which is literally how to build something. So already we are looking at it as in like, you know, it's a gender demarcation of what we can do. And we actually need to start dismantling all those stereotypes from a very young age, because by doing so, we are injecting equality, diversity, and inclusion from a very, very young age. And then we fast forward to the issues that I've experienced as an engineering student and engineering profession. It's very middle-aged white men dominated. We've been having these conversations, I'm going to say, for the past 10 years, because that's my experience in the industry. So we talk a lot and it doesn't seem there's a lot of change. So we need to change the culture. By that, it's like we need to understand that everyone and anyone can do the job as long as they meet the core competencies. And let's not just say, oh, it's a men's job, oh, but you know, she's a woman, oh, we're not really sure how they identify. Do they meet the criteria? Yes, give them the job. That is part of changing the culture. Number two, it's representation matters. And I'm going to go back to what Tony said. Like, we need to break down this data to actually see, when we're talking about the marginalized groups, where do they fall in? What does the senior leadership look like? Because if the senior leadership, again, is all heavily white male dominated in early careers, is where we see a lot of those marginalized groups, we're failing as a people. We are telling them there is a glass ceiling that you can hit, and it's not going to be senior leadership. So let's make sure that we are practicing what we're preaching, and representation matters. And that's not only in terms of race or gender, we're also talking about disability. How often do we see people with disability, visible or none, in positions of leadership? And also on this point, it's all about inclusive language. We need to start using inclusive language. And I endorse what Tony also said. Using words like minority limits the people who would apply for job. But if we say marginalized, things like blacklisted, whitelisted, let's change that language to approved list to denied list. We also look at things like, when we talk about gender pronouns, this happened to me this week. I joined a call and my colleague said, oh, good afternoon, gents. And I was like, oh, and a lady. So let's just stop all of that and just say, good afternoon, everybody. By so doing, we just including people. I'm fortunate enough, I've got a voice to correct people when they do that. What about those who don't really know how to speak or have a voice for that? So for me, for now on this, that is my contribution. So let's change the culture. Representation matters. Let's not just talk. Let's actually look at our organizations and see what we can change. And inclusive language, inclusive recruitment, let's look into all of that and start actually taking action. That's all for now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Kalisha, did you want to build on that?
I did. I think you'd asked as well, you know, why is this a problem? And I had to think around that. And I think the lack of progress, again, I've been in this industry for 10 years and I still go into meetings where I'm the only non-white female in the room. And there really has been a lack of progress. And I think partly that's, one, an education piece. Two, people feel more comfortable, for example, talking about gender. There's been a lot more progress on gender, and that's because, you know, say male engineers, you have a wife, you have a daughter, it's easier to understand their perspective, their challenges that they face. But I think when it comes down to racism, people really can struggle with that concept. And also, if they don't have those lived experiences, it's a real challenge to understand that. So, you know, there is individual racism, which everyone participates in, whether it's, you know, banter or, you know, just slights that, you know, you end up stereotyping people because of society. And then the key one is this institutional racism as well, which is when organizations do not have the right processes, equal processes in place. And I think to Ian's point with a lot of the data there, it comes down to that, and the unconscious biases, the discrimination, and that's a real step that organizations, I think, need to take to review their processes, review the data. It all starts with data to understand where the issues are, to make that change. And inevitably, we've got structural racism as well. And if, for example, we have underprivileged ethnic minorities who, you know, don't go to university, don't go to Russell Group universities, and we have this old boys network way of recruiting and homogenizing our own business, we are not helping ourselves. So, you know, I really think organizations need to make that change to how they recruit, and equally individuals need to make that change, how they behave, to provide an inclusive culture. I'll stop there for now.
Thank you. No, really valid points. And I think I could draw some conclusions in the fact that I wear a HR hat, have done for about 25, 30 years. And it was always HR deals with these problems. Well, firstly, HR doesn't deal with it. And secondly, they're not problems. They're situations that need to be addressed. And I think by having these conversations and widening the groups of who has responsibility, personal and business, I think has to be a good step forward in terms of impacting that cultural change that's required. I know, Sharon and Tony, you do a lot of work in businesses around culture, around inclusivity. You know, what's the impact, I guess, that you've seen as a result of these sort of non-inclusive behaviours and things like that? And have you seen positives coming through at all?
So I think 2020 Black Lives Matter brought race to the fore in our industry. There was like a flurry of BLM statements went out in that summer, and I'm sorry to say, I don't think there was much action followed them. And what I would really love to see is people calling people out on those BLM statements that came out, because I think you would find that leadership thought we need to get one out and that job done. Businesses are stepping up on it, so you know, some are doing a lot more than others. I think, you know, as we've talked about before, we need to be kind of looking at processes, you know, starting with recruitment, you know, going from start to end recruitment process. Have you done that review about, you know, your job description, you know, where are you advertising, kind of, are you doing blind CVs, diverse panels, that kind of thing. Make sure that kind of you've pulled out as much bias as possible out of that process, and actually making sure that you've got feedback and you're listening from your Black and Asian staff about what they found in there when they were recruited, so that you're getting that input specific to the organisation. I think one thing I did want to raise as well is the regionality when it comes to race. So, you know, being in London, I think it's 40% people of colour. Yeah, Tony will tell you up in Scotland it's a lot less than that. So actually some organisations are looking at it as, come back to data again, some organisations are looking at it as a whole, but actually you might find in London you're really underperforming. I think likewise Ian touched on, you know, some of those big clients, the big public sector clients that you've got that data from. That's brilliant. They're doing a lot on D&I. That doesn't translate to the rest of the industry. And also, where are some of those big projects going on? HS2, Birmingham, London. Again, you know, that data's probably swayed a little bit. But there's loads of things that people can be doing. I'm going to let Tony speak, but the main point is to kind of have an anti-racism strategy in place, and to be looking at all various different things, reverse mentoring, you know, looking at microaggressions. All these things can be done, but you've got to have the resource, you've got to have the will to do it. And at the moment, I think sometimes we're struggling with that with some of our companies in our industry.
I absolutely agree with a lot of what Sharon said there in terms of some of the activities that you would take in the workplace. I think for me, I spent the first 25 minutes of this call waiting to hear when the word racism would come up, and it did from Kalisha 25 minutes in, and I actually think that's probably the most important thing that we need to be focusing on. The representation of people from the global ethnic majority in the workplace, in this industry, and at all levels within it, is not a diversity, equity and inclusion issue. It's a racism issue. And actually what we need to be focusing on as professionals in this space or in any workplace in the UK or anywhere in the world is actually anti-racism. We need to be tackling that. That's far more important, far more valuable than beginning to take action and activities around our recruitment processes, around our employer branding, employee resource groups, any of that kind of stuff. Those things are incredibly important, but they are almost meaningless until we've actually, as a society, as an industry, as humans, started to focus on anti-racism, and that needs to be proactive, concerted, committed, dedicated, hard work that needs to be done by the dominant majority on these islands, that needs to be done predominantly by them. To pick up on something that Sharon said about, reverse mentoring, these programs are great. I like to think that more is reciprocal mentoring rather than reverse mentoring. But something I have found through the work that my consulting business has been doing over the last few years, particularly since May 2020, and the increased profile of the Black Lives Matter movement, is that reverse mentoring has often been used as a way for senior leaders to use a person from the global ethnic majority in their organisation to educate them on racism, and that's not what it should be about. It should be a reciprocal process. So I think that if we first of all focus our attention on understanding race, dealing with how uncomfortable privilege is, and that notion of understanding our own privilege, because we all have privilege in some way or another, but the dominance of white privilege over a long period of time has had the impact that it's had and continues to have today. So organisations do have, and their leaders do have, a responsibility to address that, to then adopt an anti-racist approach and be very concerted about that, measure how they're progressing on that, to Sharon's point, be willing to publicise the actions that they've done and be held to account for those. Then we can start to focus on some of those core activities associated with traditional diversity, equity and inclusion best practice in organisations, and around recruitment, around talent development, around allowing and enabling everybody to work in a psychologically safe environment where they can be their true authentic selves. So that's really my main focus, would be that before we even get to thinking about DEI, which is completely separate to anti-racism, that we should be focusing on anti-racism. You're on mute, Claire.
You'd think we'd learn by now, but yes, I haven't. Thank you, Sharon, Tony. I think there's it is evident from the data that's been shared, the thoughts and feelings of people in communities, and then what you're seeing in business, that there's no benefits to carrying on like this for individuals or organisations, and change does need to happen. And our sector, sadly, as we've already shared, is not moving maybe as quickly as it could, or definitely as it should. Kalisha, I know you and I have had discussions on so much talk and so many reports and all of these happening in the past, which we're not saying is wrong. We have to have that starting point, and today we started with data, which is always useful, but we now need some action. And I think you've got some quite strong views on that point.
Yeah, I do, and we've talked about this, and I think it is important that we need the context, we need the data, we need to understand where we're at. But I think if you were to look in our industry at any organisation, and you look at our leadership board, how many Black people, how many people from ethnic minorities do you see? The data will help us, but equally we know what the situation is, and the only way we're going to make change is by people taking action. And I appreciate that that is difficult. And I think it comes back to Tony's point about people educating themselves, being self-aware, to then make that change. But there are, and I think we're coming on to this later in the conversation, but there are very simple steps that individuals and organizations can start to take, I think. And, you know, in line with Black History Month and National Inclusion Week, I think that the campaign is about time for action, not words. It's been exactly 2 years since George Floyd and all these incidents which have really woken people up, but we've not seen change. And I think the only way to move forward is for people to really pledge to take action now, and yeah, see change.
Cool. Farah, you've got your hand up, and Ian, I'll come to you afterwards if that's okay.
Yeah, sorry. So I think Ian mentioned this. The impact this has got on the business sector, and I think this is actually a cop-out. It's the use of the term BAME. It's, to me, they're hiding behind that, because when we then break down BAME, we then find out that different groups in BAME, some are actually doing better than others. So let's not hide behind the term BAME and actually use the right words. Let's me, Black, British, Asian, and I think someone made a comment that in the chat that Asian is very broad. Let's actually also break that down when we say Asian. Let's start doing that action of, let's not just hide behind a term that makes us feel comfortable. By us, I mean senior leadership. If you're using a term to feel comfortable, then there's something wrong. What are you scared of to actually break into the layers? Let's do that. And to touch on what you said around Black Lives Matter, I remember being so angry about that because Breonna Taylor passed away before George Floyd. No one made a sound for her, and the world made a sound for a man. And that is all you need to know about that statement.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Ian, may I come to you? Oh, you're on mute as well, sorry. It's today.
Yeah, just reflecting on, yes, we've got to get people to take action and become anti-racist, etc. What's going to motivate people to do that? And that's one of the things I was trying to get across in terms of the program that I'm trying to get involved in. What makes somebody actually do something different? And just appealing to their better natures, you know, is that doesn't seem to work. You know, the issue's been around for a long time, and I think we need to try and look at the business benefits and try to couch it in a different way, to try to appeal slightly differently to the white majority, the white leaderships that we see in the construction sector, and say, look, why are you fishing in a talent pool which is so narrow? You're not going to understand your customers. You're not going to get the innovation. You're not going to all the other business benefits you get if you get a wider and more diverse workforce. You know, also, you know, the industry needs 250,000 people a year, and we're fishing in this narrow pool of, you know, white blokes. It's ridiculous. You know, it's we've got to get a much more diverse view, and we've got to somehow sell the business benefits to those senior leaders, and say not just because it's the right thing to do, but it's the right thing for your business to do as well. It's like I know Tony's shaking his head here. I'm just saying we've got to think differently. He's like, because Tony, shoot me down, Tony.
No, I'm not looking to shoot you down at all. I think ultimately, of course, there are business benefits to, you know, to having a more diverse workforce. But why would I, as a multi-ethnic person of colour, want to go and work in an organisation unless I know that organisation has taken action to be anti-racist? There is absolutely no relationship or correlation between how diverse an organisation is and how and the lack of racial discrimination or racial prejudice within that organisation. There's no connection between those two things as well at all. You can't just suddenly start increasing the number of people from the global ethnic majority in an organisation and expect that systemic or institutional racism is no longer going to exist. So anti-racism shouldn't be dismissed. It has to be the main thing that people focus on, because until that's done, we're not going to see people from the global ethnic majority pursuing careers in traditionally white dominant industries, because they don't want to work in an area that there might be more people that look vaguely like them or that come from the same cultural background. But unless the underlying systemic racism has been stamped out, nobody's going to want to work there. And if they do go and work there, they won't stay.
Yeah, thank you. I can see a few hands up, and I am also conscious of time. So I'll come to Sharon, who's patiently been waiting, and then a touch back with the other hands, if that's okay.
Yeah, I was just going to add, in our industry as well, that it's not just systemic racism that's an issue. There's outright racism on sites and in offices that people see every day. And I think sometimes people turn a blind eye to it because they want to quickly get the job done. You know, we need the people on site to get the job done, and you know, people turn a blind eye. We need to get to the point where we've got zero tolerance for racism on site. And at the moment, we haven't got that. So, you know, just to add to the systemic racism issues, the blatant racism as well.
Thank you. Melania?
Thank you. I just wanted to add something that I believe Kalisha Farai mentioned as well. And just to kind of reply to what Ian said. So I think that when we're thinking about an industry, we are within a social context. So within that social context, so we're talking about a system of oppression within that social context. So it's important to understand that as an individual, we do have a say of this is my individual contribution into then interpersonal and then institutional and structural. So if we just making an example of a global company leader could actually influence apart from their peers and employees, but also holding that potential power or influence country policies or board seats. So this is wider than that. So it's not just about the business case of having X amount of people of color. This is about our entire society, and you as an individual, as a white middle-aged man or middle-aged woman or white woman, we are perpetuating that system of oppressions. So I just wanted to say that this is a little bit wider than the business. So just to putting into context. Thank you.
No worries. I think that sort of maybe leads on a bit nicely as an influencer in your role. What is it that you see? What is your experience of somebody who that is your day job, is to support businesses in this, making a difference, making it more inclusive? I don't know if you want to share some views briefly with us from that point.
Yeah, so I hope to include a little bit of all the views that we had today. So a little bit from Farai, Kalisha, Tony, as well, Sharon put in some point, and Ian, thank you very much for the data. So I just wanted to start with acknowledging that inequity and systemic racism exist in our society, and they are reflected in our behaviors. So that is in the form of unconscious bias, right? So through our bias behavior, we bring inequity in our businesses. And if we are not addressing the root cause, we are only managing the symptoms. So central of our race equality agenda in business, it needs to be the anti-racism concept, right? So as we already talked about. So what is this anti-racism concept? So it's a call for action for white people and non-Black communities to play an active role in the fight against systemic racism. So only with anti-racism, which is intentional, we can remove systemic barriers. So as a leaders, we should tackle two items in the talent cycle change management to be able to attract, retain, and develop diverse talent. The first one is system change, and the second one is behavioral change. So we talked about system change. So we refer to inequity and inconsistency around processes, right? So this is all due to unconscious bias. So recruitment, promotion, or even the pay gap that is existent. Then we talk about behavioral change. So that, of course, is the most difficult one. But that refers to inclusive culture, when an employee can actually feel the sense of belonging and really bring their true self into work. So how do we do that, right? So that's the question. So I really think that the main pillar that holds these two change management items, it's leadership. So we need to transform in accountable, inclusive, but also diverse leadership. So that's acting as a role model and change agents, but we need to commit to targets. So what do I mean with that? Well, we discuss about detailed targets for ethnic minorities. So different job levels, including leadership levels, but also promotion targets. We need to measure promotion rate of ethnic minorities versus the same pace or rate of no ethnic minorities. So our visions needs to be to have an organization that reflects the community in which we live and work. And this is the point that Shannon raised, which is as well looking into regionalities that comes into place. So I think the transformation will need to be across multiple layers. So getting the talent through the door is only the first step. And we talked about how do we understand the barrier and the challenges of people of color. And I think we need to co-create a tangible action plan. So first of all, we need to listen to our employees. So not just with surveys, but with focus groups, safe spaces to be able to share their real life experience. So how do we do that? An example of a safe space, it's, for example, a forum for people of color without allies. So if we think about some core emerging themes of barriers, lack of representation at senior levels, that is result in the lack of belonging from ethnic minorities, the impact of discrimination and microaggression in the workplace, which is resulting in the lack of self-esteem. So I want to leave you with 3 practical call for action. So the first one, check your policies. D&I, respect at work, audit your grievance process. Does your company have a support to safe spaces for ethnic minorities to really speak up? So I think it's important to understand that ethnic minorities are a potentially vulnerable stakeholder in our business. That means you will need to evaluate alternative escalation processes in case of grievance, for example, an anonymous reporting line. 2, of course, we talked about auditing recruitment process, put to breakdown targets, gate system, but unconscious bias training for hiring managers need to be part of that. And lastly, to retain but also elevate and value the people of color. Apart from providing, of course, promotion opportunities, sponsorship and development, we need to have that training for the whole company, real conversation. So example could be cross-cultural awareness trainings for managers, and also something you can use from today. You can go into the ICE, so the Institute of Civil Engineers website, for free, look for the anti-racism toolkit. I will put the link into the chat. So this is something that we can use as a tool today, because as a bystander, my responsibility and your responsibility is to learn and recognize casual racism in the workplace and call it out. So I just wanted to conclude my point to say that race equity agenda is about ensuring the anti-racism practice. It's central to the organizational practice, so it's embedded in the systemic functioning of a business. Because anti-racism and D&I is not a trend. It's not a PR, it's not a marketing. It's a core strategic item for a sustainable business. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. A lot to take away there. So I think that's, you know, we said at the beginning that we want to put things in context and make sure that we do give people some actionable takeaways. And I think, you know, there are some obvious ones, like you mentioned at the beginning, about policies. It's not just a HR job, it's a company job to have a look at the policies and their procedures that go alongside their auditing recruitment. We know in other roundtables we've had the unconscious bias creeps in around all areas of diversity. So absolutely, I think you're right there. And you know, it's great to see that there are no real excuses. There's freebie training out there, there's freebie support and that sort of thing. And I think when we go back to Ian's piece around SMEs that might be struggling more in this space because they don't have the resource, be that expertise or finance, there is free things out there. So I think, you know, as a group, we'll make sure that the links are shared and that, you know, AC pushes some of these accessible resources out to its members so that we can help. And I'm sure after this, we will get questions and that come in to ask for more help. And I'll, again, as I said, make sure they come to you as the experts to see where maybe you can help further. I'm conscious we've, you know, in the last 10 minutes, and I want to build on Melania's recommendations. I know right at the beginning, Ian suggested things like allies, you know, make sure your organisation has allies in the space. But if I can come out to the other members now and maybe for you to share your sort of number one wish, number one piece of advice, the one thing that you think is going to make that difference now, you know, today or in the very near future. Maybe Sharon, can I come across to you for your wise words?
Yeah, I'm slightly worried I'm going to repeat what other people have said, but the main point for me is to be taking action. It's to be listening and speaking to your Black or Asian colleagues to understand what the challenges really are for your organisation, and then to kind of start reviewing your processes and you know, updating them and seeing where those barriers are in place. I just think, you know, you talk about SMEs, actually, you know, the changing a culture of an SME is a lot easier than changing a culture of a large organisation, which is like steering the Titanic. Like, you know, so actually there's a lot that you can do with the SMEs working on that culture piece. So yeah, I'll let others speak again.
Thank you. Tony, as you're off mute, I'll come to you next.
So hard to come up with just one, but let's start with just one, which I would say would be to audit your language, because used effectively, language can be a really great tool for eradicating racism.
Yeah. And I made a note, actually, there's a couple of times that, you know, there's some difference in the panel around terminology that's used or descriptions that are used. And, you know, it would be great after this if, as a group, maybe we could come out with some signposting for our members as to options you may wish to choose, because at the end of the day, it's down to the individual organisations. But I think giving that helping hand as to what would be the better term or more appropriate term or more acceptable term, I think would be a very valuable exercise. So thank you for that. Kalisha?
Yeah, I think I'd probably just encourage individual action for everybody to educate themselves, or at least reflect, have a self-reflection period. What privilege do you have? And just have those uncomfortable conversations, start to have those with your family, your colleagues, and your peers and things like that. And I think the sooner we start to have those conversations, the more it will open up this conversation and hopefully build from there. Yeah.
I think that's quite an interesting approach, actually, because if you think of circle of influence,
yeah,
the most influence you have is on yourself, isn't it? You know, you can change yourself, you can make a choice and then use that to influence others. So yeah, really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Melania?
Oh, I think Farai was right, Juna, go ahead.
Oh no, it's you can go. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to say one thing. So I think the uncomfortable conversation, I think we need to normalize that. So I think fundamentally, again, what is the root cause? So if we're thinking about unconscious bias, and there's a word that many people use, but what is it? Do we really understand that? And what is that cycle of socialization where we learn biases? Because I think, as we said, first reaction, a realization is a sense of shame, right? So you feel shame, it is a defensive position, but as well, you think that biases your identity. So there is a lot of thinking that you need to have to really separate yourself from your social and cultural context, and really looking at to break down the cycle and move towards that direction of change and learning, which is wider than just business, but it's about being a leader and having that growth mindset and really building our new identity base of education, questioning and reframing. This is how we're going to make a change.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for being polite panelists. Farah, come over to yourself.
Yeah, so I'm not going to regurgitate what everyone is saying because I think we all have the same points. But what I was going to say is it's Black History Month this month in the UK. And like Kalisha mentioned, the theme for this year is time for action and less words. And I actually love this theme because it's very imperative, not just for October 2022. It's imperative if we really want to make tangible change on this conversation we've been having for the past 10 years. So my advice is two things. We, and I'm putting myself in there, people who are in a position who have got the privilege to actually make change, let's do it. Let's use our platforms. Let's challenge our managers. Let's challenge our colleagues to say, let's go in our communities. Let's actually work towards the promises we've been making, whether the promises are the targets, like you said, Melania, the promotion targets, anti-racism, whatever it is. Let's stop talking. Let's put literally money where our mouth is and make that change. We need to make the action. Let's use our platform. Let's use our privileges. And the other one is, I'm sure people who are listening wonder why I had a description as to who I am and what I'm wearing. Let's be inclusive. I am all for inclusivity. We use Zoom, but we also forget that by using Zoom, there are those who have difficulties in seeing or understanding. But I just wanted to give them an insight to say you're included by knowing what I'm wearing and what I look like. And now you know my voice. Let's look at our recruitment policies and methods. If we're advertising on sites, let's have a text that says, this company is, for me, I'll say CBRE. The logo is all uppercase in dark green colors, spelling out CBRE. That person will know what the logo looks like if you put our logo. Let's look at our language that we're using to be more inclusive. And I think by being inclusive, by really being inclusive and accepting the diversity and how everyone is different, I think we'll make a great first step towards anti-racism. And that's where we need to start.
Super. Thank you. Sadly, we are coming into the last minute or so of the roundtable, and I think it's been quite thought-provoking for some people. I think, as we've said, it's not a comfortable topic always, and it, you know, and something that some people may find a challenge. But like with most things, the more you talk about it, the more you learn, the easier it becomes to take action. And I think this is shouting so loud from this call, is that we need to do something and stop just talking about it. So I thank you all really for, you know, really much for being open, being honest, not all agreeing, you know, having your own views. That's what makes us all unique and individuals in our own rights, and that's fine. I think it is about learning from one another and talking about subjects that sometimes are a challenge, but we know we need to, and we know they need to make a difference. What we will do is send a recording around from today's session to our members. It will also be on our website, along with a number of other opportunities to get involved in talking about ED&I, to participate. So we have the previous roundtables, they're all on our website as well. We'll have a new programme next year, to looking at other communities and shining the light on other areas where maybe we need to start talking and doing and acting more. And finally, I would also share that we are going to be looking at People First Charter. So as ACE, through our members, we are going to be looking at trying to hold ourselves, each other, organisations to account, and shining a light on that as well. So more details around that will be coming out towards the end of this year into next year. And I welcome anyone on the call who's interested in getting involved to reach out to Dow or myself, and of course you as panelists. I'll be coming to you anyway to get your support and views on that piece. I do have to draw it to a close. I don't know if it's a legacy hand, or you do want to have one last piece, Farai?
No, I just wanted to add that if anyone who is in the audience just wanted to reach out, my LinkedIn is open, feel free, and I'll be happy to have a chat regarding anything that I've said, and yeah, if you want to discuss further.
Super, thank you, I appreciate that. And I know the people on the call have contributed to other webinars, to white papers, to articles, and we will continue doing that. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that offer. And once again, thank you so much for joining us. We are literally at 1 o'clock now, so we do need to close, but I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.